When I landed in America, I understood that we never had a chance. April 1945, Mid-Atlantic Ocean. A German sergeant, one of nearly 500 prisoners of war crammed into the steel belly of an American Liberty ship, clutches an empty biscuit tin as waves the size of 3-story buildings slam against the hull. The ship groans. Metal screams. Somewhere above deck, the ocean tears away everything not welded down. Around him, men vomit into whatever containers they can find. The air reeks of oil, sweat, and human misery. No windows, no escape, just iron walls and the Atlantic's fury. But 12 days ago, these same men were starving in a French prison camp, eating from garbage piles thin as skeletons. Now they have food, more food than they've seen in months. Their stomachs, shrunken from starvation, can't handle it. So they eat, and vomit, and eat again, because for the first time in this war, they finally see the truth. Germany never had a chance. December 7th, 1944. Cherbourg, France. The battle for this port city ended 6 months earlier, in June of 1944, when American forces captured it during the Normandy invasion. What followed was the largest prisoner of war operation in the European theater. By autumn, over 250,000 German prisoners were being held in Normandy alone, nearly as many as the entire German occupation force had been. The camp at La Glacerie, just outside Cherbourg, was established by American authorities in August 1944. 16 rectangular compounds, each holding 80 to 100 structures or tents. The men held there came from every branch of the Wehrmacht: Luftwaffe ground crews, Panzer crewmen without tanks, infantry survivors from the Falaise Pocket, veterans of Russia, North Africa, Italy. Now they existed in limbo between war and peace. Under the Geneva Convention, prisoners of war were supposed to be treated humanely, fed adequately, protected from the elements. But resources in liberated France were scarce. The French population itself was starving. German prisoners were at the bottom of the priority list. Red Cross inspection reports describe conditions that varied dramatically from camp to camp. Some facilities maintained standards. Others descended into chaos. The memoir we're following describes systematic hunger. Men scrounging through garbage, trading personal possessions for scraps of food. The kind of slow starvation that makes men's cheekbones protrude and their eyes sink into shadowed sockets. Little did they know, their journey was about to change everything they thought they understood about this war. April 1945, a gray Tuesday before Easter. Cold, wet wind chases around the tents. American soldiers appear and order approximately 500 non-commissioned officers to gather their possessions and prepare to march out. The prisoners don't know where they're going. They pack their bundles, what little they have left. Handmade knives, carved boxes, personal letters, the small dignities of imprisonment. They wait at the camp gate. Hours pass. Noon comes. No food. The men grow restless, then indifferent, then irritated. Finally, in the afternoon, the order comes: march. They walk south through rows of at least 200 American soldiers standing on both sides of the road, past other prisoners, Poles, Czechs, Austrians wearing German uniforms, a colorful collection of Europe's unwilling warriors. The memoir notes something significant. The American frontline soldiers marching beside them today are peaceful, almost sympathetic. Weapons shouldered. Not one hate-filled word. Even the French civilians don't react as the column passes. This is different from the Germany they knew. Different from the propaganda about American brutality. Different from everything they expected. They reach Cherbourg Harbor. 3 American ships are anchored there. At the sight, an icy horror grips the thoughts of the prisoners. Where are they being taken? 1600 hours. April 1945. American hands search their pockets, throwing handmade knives, boxes, and cartons into the water. Everything they've created during months of captivity, gone in seconds. Then, in double rows, They're shoved over a small gangplank through an iron door frame into the body of an American troopship, the Thomas Marshall. The ship's interior staggers them. 5-story bunks constructed from iron bars and canvas line the walls. Each bed has a blanket and a life jacket that doubles as a pillow. In the middle of the room, tables and benches that remind them of a barracks mess hall. Right next to their quarters, the galley, where American cooks are already busy. Liberty ships were the backbone of American sea logistics. Between 1941 and 1945, American shipyards built 2,710 Liberty ships, an average of 3 ships every 2 days. The fastest, the SS Robert E. Peary, was launched just 4 days and 15 hours after her keel was laid. The German prisoners are staring at American mass production made real. Then comes the moment that changes everything. A voice over the loudspeaker calls their attention to a gigantic mountain of cracker cartons stored in one corner. Everyone is free to take as much as he wants. The announcement causes unbelievable laughter to break out. These are men who've been starving for months, who've fought over scraps, who've watched comrades waste away, and now unlimited food. Like pilgrims to a holy mountain, they make their way to the corner. The pile melts like snow in the March sun. The Americans don't panic. They don't pull out weapons. They simply appear, and through their presence, bring order back to the crowd. 2 guards arrive. They sit at a table in the back, holding their weapons. 10 minutes later, they recognize their presence is ridiculous. They lay their weapons down behind them. When the officer responsible for prisoners enters with the captain, he sends the guards away, satisfied with the prisoners' conduct and the cleanliness of their quarters. Then he delivers a speech. No one on board needs to go hungry. There are plenty of provisions. This wins over all the prisoners, who express their enthusiasm with a spontaneous round of applause. Think about that. German POWs, enemy soldiers, applauding an American officer. Not because they've surrendered their will, not because they're broken, but because, for the first time in years, someone has offered them basic human dignity and abundance. At 1800 hours, a prisoner nicknamed Hawker calls the first group to receive their meal. The memoir writer expected a mad rush. Instead, the men line up in orderly rows without pushing or shoving. Why the discipline? Because of the crackers. Because of the officer's speech, and because of an old truth. When there are plenty of things available, no one has an overriding interest in them. Scarcity creates violence. Abundance creates peace. The cooks work until 2000 hours in uninterrupted service as men from the starvation camps continue to reappear for God knows how many times with empty plates. Finally, even the biggest glutton lies on his cot with a full belly. Around 2200 hours, a shiver runs through the ship. Unnoticed by the exhausted prisoners, the Thomas Marshall has left Cherbourg Harbor and steams under its own power toward the sea, the European mainland. Their homeland, their families, everything that is important and dear to them, sinks in the night and fog behind them, for friends gather around a table under electric lamps. The memoir identifies them as Helmut, Schultz, Hawker, and Siegfried. Now we know the purpose for the interrogations. The narrator opens. They are taking us away from firm land because we still present a threat to them. Schultz, downtrodden. If they just do not take us to England. Hawker. I do not think so, because we are on an American ship and our guards are apparently returning to the USA on leave. The narrator. As far as I am concerned, they can take us to the moon. The main thing is that hunger has come to an end. Siegfried states it clearly. The war is as good as lost for us. But I don't see why we were not sent to America before, especially since the danger of being turned over to the French seemed quite real. He continues, in the USA we will not be treated as vacation guests, but for whatever work we do they will at least give us enough to eat. Something that never was and never will be the case in France. His exact words, for us prisoners of war, it is very simple. We only have to survive the chaos. I feel myself obligated to keep myself healthy so that later I can be of long service to my fatherland. Pause. They don't know it yet, but their understanding of this war is about to be shattered. Morning, April 1945. Off the coast of England, the ship is stopped, waiting to join a convoy. This is standard procedure. Even in April 1945, with Germany collapsing, Admiral Donit's submarines still prowl the shipping lanes. The prisoners are allowed on deck in groups of 100 men for 1 hour. When the door opens, Helmut lifts his gaze. Over there, wrapped in a gentle veil of fog, lies England. It's the first time many of these men have seen the island nation they've been fighting for years. What do you promise us in America? Siegfried asks. It is hard to say. It cannot be any worse than we have had up to this time. Then comes the crucial observation. America is no closed group of people. It is the melting pot of the entire world. We will not be greeted exclusively with hate, especially since the country has been untouched by the war and has plenty of citizens of German ancestry. At 20-30 hours, the engines start running. The ship shakes. Water splashes on board. Farewell, Europe. Dear homeland. May God protect you. By 1400 hours the next day, the prisoners are allowed on deck again. All around them, boats of all types steaming to the west. Convoy. Siegfried, the self-appointed expert. We are coming into a bad weather zone. He turns his eyes in all directions, a furrow between his eyebrows. His rust-red hair flutters in the wind. It does not look good for at least half of our comrades. What do you mean? Because they certainly will have to throw up when the dance starts. Slowly, the ship lifts its nose, then slowly lets it sink. Small gray-black hills pass by the ships, sometimes spraying up in front of the deck. Then Schultz leans over the rail. Helmut follows, hour after hour tied to their beds. Only in the horizontal position is the rocking bearable. Heads pounding, stomachs pushing up into throats. The guards disappear, exchanging their weapons for washcloths. Friend and enemy are united under the same misery. Seasickness. At 2100 hours, the ship's captain announces, during the night, the storm will hit. That means number 10-sized waves, gentlemen. Then the storm truly arrives. For days, the Thomas Marshall squeezes through the storm-tossed sea. Mighty waves roll over its deck and tear away everything that is not nailed or tied down. Night-black rain clouds push against its main mast. Heaven and hell, storm and water have united in a wild inferno of nature's power. The brave ship totters westward, moaning and groaning and threatening to be torn apart at the seams. Inside, the most complicated creations of an almighty God have been humbled to the most pitiable creatures. The exhaust system fails. The air becomes a mixture of oil, fat, soup, coffee, cigarette smoke, and vomit. Tables, benches, pots, and boxes break loose and clatter around the room, as though they are under the influence of a magnetic power. Then, in the middle of the storm, a message spreads around the Earth's globe. The President of the United States has died of a stroke. April 12, 1945, 1535 Eastern Wartime. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, sitting for a portrait at his little White House in Warm Springs, Georgia, complained of a terrific headache, collapsed unconscious, and died of a massive cerebral hemorrhage. He was 63 years old. He had been president for 12 years, 39 days, longer than any other person in American history. The news hits like a torpedo in their room in the ship. But the prisoners are seasick, exhausted, barely able to process the information. What they do know is this: the ship doesn't stop. At 0300 hours, over the loudspeaker, "Put on your life jackets. The storm has become stronger." The Thomas Marshall is for all practical purposes a toy for the unfettered elements. Completely apathetic and driven only by fear, the men pull on their life jackets. Then it happens. The furiously rolling ship takes a thundering hit against its bottom. Torpedo? Mine? Complete disorder develops. Panic-stricken prisoners dash up the stairway and bang with their fists against the closed bulkhead. In the next moment, a voice over the loudspeaker. Attention! There is no reason for excitement. A swell has simply pushed the front of the ship out of the water and let it smash on top of a huge wave. In 5 hours, the storm will be past and we will be in a calmer zone again. With hanging heads, slightly ashamed but freed from pressing fear, everyone reels back into his bunk. Outside, the storm and ocean rage and bellow undiminished. April 14th, 1945. 800 hours. Schultz and Helmut sit with their backs against the tool chest on deck in wonderful sunshine, looking relieved over the endless but finally calm desert of water. Our brave Thomas Marshall has proven itself to be a tough fellow. Hocker and Siegfried, busy as cooks for the Americans, bring condensed canned milk and wonderful bread rolls with jam for breakfast. Hocker has promised salmon and mayonnaise at 10 o'clock. Siegfried has seen the maps hanging below the upper deck. Our march route will take us to Boston, where I have relatives, or direct to New York. How far is it to the New World? We have completed about half of the trip. It is over 4,000 miles from Cherbourg to New York. Then comes the call, iceberg in sight, starboard ahead. Everything else is forgotten. Friend and enemy stand in thick clumps pressed together on the starboard railing. At first it's nothing more than a blinding white mass, not bigger than a sugar loaf, rising out of the dark water. But as they draw closer, the crystal colossus grows. Someone behind them recalls, that was around 1912. An English luxury ship on its maiden voyage collided with an iceberg and sank with the richest people on board. The ship was named the Titanic. The prisoners stare at the ice giant in respectful awe. Then, mischievously, Helmut starts a rumor. Look there! On the middle glacier, a polar bear is climbing up. She has her cubs with her. Soon, nearly everyone on deck is searching intensively for the non-existent bears. When Hocker can't keep up the falsehood anymore, roaring laughter drives tears from his eyes. The laughter is infectious. Even those who were deceived can't stay furious. It's a moment of pure humanity. German prisoners and American guards, united in laughter at a stupid joke, surrounded by icebergs in the middle of the Atlantic. The war feels very far away. Late April 1945. Morning. A radiant blue heaven covers the metropolis of New York City. Like a giant in the upper bay of the Hudson River, the Thomas Marshall docks. The German prisoners of war assemble on deck to disembark. Greeted by the small island with the Statue of Liberty, it works magic as smiles break across the faces of these foreign soldiers. But those smiles are complicated, bittersweet. Soldiers who, despite all their efforts, are conscious that they are prisoners of the freest land under the sun. Their amazed focus is on the mighty monuments of stone, the skyscrapers of Manhattan, weathered gray, cold and foreign, completely impersonal, towering in the American sky. On the other side of the great harbor, the four friends stand together, taking in the view of the unequaled city. Why? Helmut asks, looking toward the skyscrapers. Have the Americans built such gigantic structures? Schultz. The land here must be extremely expensive, and so they simply built in the direction of heaven. But that's not the real answer. The real answer is in what they see around them. Not just the skyscrapers, the endless rows of Liberty ships in the harbor, the industrial cranes, the cargo containers, the casual abundance, the sheer scale of American power made visible. During their journey, they've been counting, observing, calculating. They know that German U-boats sank approximately 2,779 Allied merchant ships totaling 14.1 million gross tons. But looking at New York Harbor in April 1945, you wouldn't know it. The ships just keep coming. America built them faster than Germany could sink them. Between 1941 and 1945, American shipyards launched 2,000, 710 Liberty ships alone, plus hundreds of victory ships, escort carriers, destroyers, cruisers, battleships. The mathematics are undeniable. One of the prisoners, possibly Helmut himself, finally voices what they've all been thinking. When I landed in America, I understood that we never had a chance. Not in the romantic sense of battlefield courage. Not in the propaganda sense of Aryan superiority. In the cold, industrial, mathematical sense. Germany, with a population of approximately 70 million and limited natural resources, had gone to war against the Soviet Union. 170 million people, vast territory, endless reserves. The British Empire, 500 million people across a quarter of the globe. The United States, 130 million people sitting on the richest deposit of natural resources on Earth. American annual steel production in 1943, 80.6 million tons. German steel production in 1943, 30.6 million tons. American aircraft production 1939 to 1945, 300,000, 317 planes. German aircraft production 119,000, 307 planes. American tanks produced 88,410. German tanks 49,777. And it wasn't just the numbers. It was the system. Henry Ford's assembly line, perfected in Detroit, could train an unskilled worker to build a complex machine in days. Germany still relied on skilled craftsmen, apprenticed for years. American oil production in 1945, 4.7 million barrels per day. German synthetic fuel production at its peak, 124,000 barrels per day. The logistics alone told the story. America was supplying not just its own military but also Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and the Free French. The Lend-Lease program, by war's end, had shipped 17.5 million tons of military equipment, 427,284 trucks and jeeps, 13,303 aircraft, 7,056 tanks. Enough food to feed an army. And America wasn't even scratched. No bombs had fallen on Detroit. No artillery had shelled Pittsburgh's steel mills. No armies had burned Kansas wheat fields. The home front was untouched. This is what the German prisoners finally understood, standing in New York Harbor. Not that they had fought poorly. Not that they had lacked courage. Not that their tactics were inferior. Simply that they had gone to war against an industrial colossus that could absorb every loss and return with 10 times the force. Historical records show that approximately 371,000 German prisoners of war were held in the United States during World War II, housed in over 500 camps across the country. They worked on farms, in factories, in forests. They were paid for their labor 80 cents per day, in accordance with the Geneva Convention. They were fed adequately, housed in heated barracks, and given access to recreational facilities. It wasn't paradise. It was prison. But compared to the starvation camps of France, compared to the brutal conditions on the Eastern Front, compared to what German forces had inflicted on Soviet and Polish prisoners, it was humane. Most German POWs returned home between 1945 and 1946. Some chose to stay in America after the war. The memoir we followed captures something rarely acknowledged in war histories: the moment when soldiers stop seeing the enemy as evil and start seeing them as human. And the moment when they understand, with mathematical clarity, why they lost. Not because of betrayal, not because of cowardice, not because of conspiracy, but because they challenged an industrial system so vast, so productive, so overwhelming that victory was never possible. When Helmut landed in America, he understood that Germany never had a chance. It wasn't a confession. It was a realization. And sometimes realization is the first step toward peace. This was just one of countless untold stories from the Second World War. Subscribe to World War II Stories as we continue to bring these forgotten chapters of history back to life.